Hello everybody, I am here with David Bratanek and we're continuing to talk about the development of Lakeside Subdivision. And last time we had talked, we were at City Hall and we sat and talked about the fact that the difference between severance and a subdivision and how we had to go to City Hall and apply for that. Well, the nice thing is that's done. So what we've got now is 7 potential building lots. And we're just going to talk about the next phase of what the development will entail.
So the next step is to actually service the lots. So when we were at City Hall, we did all the paperwork for the city. We gave them the draft plan application form, and then that went to public consultation, and then they had a meeting and everything was approved. So once it's approved, we now have draft plan approval is what it's called. And so there are conditions that need to be met for that. And one of those things is we need to be able to put in servicing because your brand new home needs to have access to water and sewers and hydro and all that stuff.
Okay, let's go over to where they'll be done and talk from there. So David, what are the services that are required to get to move into a house? I know there's like water and gas, but what is the exhaustive list of things that you'd need to live in a house?
So in order to live in a house, obviously you have to connect it to the services that are on the street. And the most common services are your water line, your sewer line, your gas line, hydro as well. If it goes underground, then you do underground hydro, so you'll tap into wherever the line is. And if you do above ground, then you can do it across the street. The other thing that will come in is there's some auxiliary businesses that will come in and they'll install their own lines at the same time. So that'll be typically cable TV and telephone lines coming into the house so that you are all wired up and they just need to come in and activate your box and then you're good to go.
Cool. So you were mentioning about services on the street. So obviously these houses all have all of those, but so does that mean that the services are across the street, or and if so, how will they get them? Will they come across and then run a line, or do they come across individually?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the services on the street, there'll be a servicing map that you can get from the city. If you're buying a single lot, it's a good idea to look at that map to see where you're going to have to connect to, and it'll depend based on where the developer originally put them in. They'll be in the same location as they always have been. Sometimes they're in the very middle of the street, sometimes they're on one side, and sometimes you have hydro on one side, gas on a different side, sewer maybe down the middle. It's all dependent on how that subdivision was originally planned out.
Okay.
So in order to connect to those, you need what's called the lateral. There are some places where they allow you to do a separate line that runs parallel, but in this situation we'll be doing direct laterals into the existing sewer, water lines, all those things.
So you were mentioning sewers. So there's sanitary and storm sewers. What is the difference between sanitary and storm sewers?
So a storm sewer is water runoff that comes from the property. So you can see when you have a house, you have a roof, you have concrete driveway, you have walkways, all that kind of stuff. So there's more water that comes off the property rather than permeating into the ground. Okay. So what we expect is, so we have storm sewers will take that water from typically from rain and from snow melt and all that kind of stuff, and it brings it into a sewer in the middle of the street, and then that goes to water treatment as well, but it's done differently. It's not treated the same way as your sanitary line, and your sanitary line connects directly to the house, and that has all of your wastewater from inside the house. So that's from your showers, your toilets, your sinks, all of that goes into a different line, and then that goes out to the water treatment plant as well.
Okay, so we've got this all done. If we look across the street, there's no divots, there's nothing that would show services, but like for example, there's a black or a gray box over there. What is the indication that there is services on the street, except for the fact that we're using them?
So most roads inside a city are going to have all of the same services. In country properties, it'll be a little bit different. Some don't have water lines, some don't have gas lines. But the typical way you can tell is obviously we have hydro on the street because we have street lights, and we have houses that have lights in them. So obviously there's hydro here. You can see the storm sewers all connect here at the curb.
Okay.
And so where all that water runs off into, that goes into the storm sewer and goes out. So it's clear we have a storm sewer here. And then because we're not on septic tanks in this area, everybody will be on water and sanitary sewers. And so those will run under the street as well. And the city will have a map of that, but you also will have them located by the city. They'll come out and do all the locates to make sure exactly where they are. And they use metal detectors and other things to know exactly where the services are.
So now, when we go to build a house here, because the builders will be building 7 houses here, correct? So when they're building the house, does the city tie in, or do they tie in, or where? First of all, also, like, are the sewers there? Is the services over here? Where are the services?
So the services aren't to the lots yet. They're still running along the street. The process with the city is they have a list of approved contractors typically, and so what you do is you put it out to tender. So that is, you take your entire project, you send it to, usually it's 6 or 7 different companies that are approved to do this type of work. They give you a quote for what it will cost. You pay the city, and the city pays the contractor to go ahead and do the work as required.
So, and then the builder will hook into it?
So what will happen is they will put in the lateral lines that will run into the lot line, and when the house is being built, they will excavate and they will connect those directly to the house. And so depending on where they end up on the street, because you can't always control that, the city tells you where to put those laterals in. Okay. It depends on where it actually connects into your house.
Okay, so I want to build and I want to save these trees. Can I make sure for sure that I save these trees and I put my driveway on the other side of the trees?
You can't always make sure of that. Services have to go in where they have to go. There's engineering behind it with elevations for sewers especially that have to be followed. And so we can't guarantee that the trees are going to be able to stay. However, as long as the services are run so that they don't impact the trees, and the way the house is laid out, it doesn't impact the trees. There's no reason necessarily that the trees can't stay. It's just a matter of where the city requires servicing to go and how you can fit the house on the lot afterwards. Last
thing. On all the new houses I've been to in the last, say, 7 or 8 years, when I go in the backyard, there's a big cement storm drain. Is it a storm drain, or what is it?
So those are called backyard catch basins. And when you have a house, you have to grade the entire property away from the house. And that's for water runoff. You don't want water sitting next to your foundation ever. And so the houses all have to have a grading plan that shows where that dirt is going to be and where all the levels are. And everything will run into that, so that when you get a rain, it will run into the backyard catch basin that will tie into your storm sewers and go out to the road.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. If you're driving down a street, or if you're driving down a new subdivision and you see something and you go, hey, that's got to be to do with servicing, I don't know what that is. Call David, call myself. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to show you what's going on in our subdivision. But if you got any questions, feel free to give us a call, and have a great week, everybody.